Hello, how are you? Here we are, talking about Villa Road.
Hello, hello.
The world and all its angels are talking in my head. The world and all its angels, they lay all its angels set table for the feast. The world and all its angels come to toast the suckling beast. Come the morning. By the dawning light, such crimes and stories, behold the wondrous sights. Come the morning, by the dawning light, such crimes and stories, behold.
Power to the biosphere.
In the 1970s, Villa Road in South London was a squatted street. Behind these doors, anarchists mixed with hippies and feminists. A primal therapy commune established itself across the street from a whole food cafe. And homeless single mothers rubbed shoulders with Marxist revolutionaries. This was a generation that wanted to change the world. Squatting was in its idealistic heyday in the mid-70s. In London alone, there were over 30,000 squatters, often occupying whole streets of abandoned houses, with hundreds of squatters living together in communities. In Brixton, the town planner's futuristic 60s blueprint for a new town centre had been shelved, and streets like Villa Road lay empty, stranded between the past and the future. Into this vacuum came the squatters. They were politicised and they were on the left. They believed in collective living and collective action, and they chose to live by their beliefs.
We actually thought that we could produce a revolution. We could produce very radical change in the way things were organised. We could increase the power of ordinary people, of working people, and so forth. We could reduce oppression, all those sorts of things. We thought all those things could be done at that time. We were trying to do them.
It was a politicised generation. I mean, we were Marxists, I suppose. Dialectical materialism and historical materialism were phrases that tripped off the tongue.
What would your ideal goal have been?
My goal is always revolution. Absolutely. Absolutely.
The idea was that people would organise and would rise up against capitalism, and there would be a revolution. It was always a little bit vague about exactly what form that might take in Britain, but you know, a general strike, whatever. I mean, it sounds, and it was, wildly utopian.
But you believed it?
Yeah.
Practically everybody I knew was political in one way or another, and it was a moment in time where we thought we knew everything. You had incredible energy, there were things happening, there'd been the miners' strikes, there were factory occupations, there were things that there was the Black Power movement in the States, there was the and so on, you know. So there was you know, something positive, which was that people were optimistic, people thought they could change the world, they wanted to change the world, and so there was a lot of activism around, and obviously one of the areas was housing.
So would you personally get the crowbar and be...
Yes, I would. We would go along perhaps late at night and get in the houses and get the electricity sorted out, and then help the people to clear out the houses and make them habitable, really.
When we moved into the houses, they had
council wreckers in them who had broken a lot of the fabric of the houses. They broke the toilets and they poured concrete down them. They broke a lot of the windows. They tore up floorboards and pulled down ceilings. And we all set to fix them. And when I look back on it, the sort of things we did were quite astounding. Because they had poured concrete down the drains, it meant that you had to dig up the connection to the main sewers out in the street. We just used to dig up the whole lot and connect it up to the mains.
What do you remember about that house, 39, when you got there?
How terribly filthy and it was.
Didn't have any floorboards in the basement.
No floorboards.
There was an old guy who had shell shock called Tim living there.
That's right.
The basement was full of excrement because he had mental health problems.
It needed a lot of cleaning up.
We went out skipping. And skipping was going around and looking in the skips that were on the streets and collecting whatever it was you needed. And so that was, there were two activities, skipping and wooding. Wooding was going out and reclaiming all the wood from the houses that were being demolished. And you basically built your environment.
Winter, the ice was on the inside of the windows. Heating was like one bar, one of those long fires, mainly for bathrooms, I think. And we used to cook on that as well, beans on toast and toast. Total fire hazard. I think the wiring was totally bent and illegal, so the gas was. It was, and I remember seeing a huge rat coming up from the basement at one time. Yeah, it was pretty rough.
Perhaps surprisingly, in the middle of a black community in Brixton, the core group that colonised Villa Road were white middle-class graduates, mainly from Oxford and Cambridge universities. Xander Fraser arrived in 1974 with a fire in his belly and a degree in architecture from Cambridge University.
Were you rich?
No, from the day I left Cambridge, I never took or asked for money off my parents. But yeah, am I from a relatively well-off family? Yes. But again, we go back to the spirit of the times. The last thing I felt it didn't make any sense for me to be ultra-critical of my parents and their view of the world, and then sit there taking money off them.
The people that I became friendly with and spent most of my time with were university graduates who found themselves on Villa Road, Oxbridge, very educated, very committed political leftist kids.
Well, I was working class and not very well educated, and I didn't know much about Marxist theory of blah, 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 and I do now, I have to say. So it was an education for me, really.
I was from a very typically middle-class background. I'd had a private education, and then I'd gone to university. So, and I probably sounded a bit posh.
In 1649, to St. George's Hill, a ragged band they call the Diggers came to show the people's will. They defied the landlords, they defied the laws. They were the dispossessed, reclaiming what was theirs. We come in peace, they said.
Pete Cooper was a graduate from Oxford who chose to squat for political reasons. He lived at number 31, the most rigorously political household on the street.
What were you doing, signing on?
Signing on, and I got a job briefly as a road sweeper, and I got another, which was great because I got the blue council jacket, which was sort of a worker's uniform. It was great, I hadn't any career plan at all. I didn't really think in those terms. I think actually people really seriously thought that the revolution was coming.
We were a bit of an Oxbridge house. We were certainly a sort of ex-student house. I would say that we were one of the sort of lefty houses rather than the sort of hippie houses.
I wouldn't say that I was particularly taken by the politics of it or involved in the politics of it before I went to Villa Road. It was only really after I got there that that started to develop.
Before Cambridge, I went to Eton. It was a bit of an education in class consciousness for me, if you like. And I remember the second day I got there when I started, I was 12. 1965, 5 or 6, and there was a speech from the headmaster to all the new boys who explained that we were going to be running the country and that we were at Eton to learn how to do that. It seemed absurd, so I'm sure I wasn't the only person who went to Eton who got pushed or went in a different direction.
The sin of property we do disdain. No man has any right to buy and sell the earth for private gain by theft and murder. They took the land. Now everywhere the walls spring up at their command.
There were two influences on us, I think. One was obviously Marx. We were Marxists. We saw ourselves as Marxists. We were in things like Marxist reading groups and we studied Marx. But we were also influenced by people like Lang and Cooper, and were into the death of the nuclear family.
This rejection of the nuclear family was born of an intellectual analysis which saw the family as an essential unit of a capitalist society.
We felt it was necessary or should be possible to have supportive, economically viable, emotionally rewarding relationships, familial, sexual relationships with people without creating or commodifying, as we like to call it, commodifying the family unit. We had a lot of theories around the family unit being the building block of capitalism.
These beliefs made life complicated at the Squatters' Resource Centre that Paul helped to run.
If people within a sexual relationship had or wanted to have an intimate physical relationship, whether it's sexual or not, with other people, then that had to be acknowledged, and it had to both be acknowledged by both partners, but also allowed to happen. It was agonising, because the thing was, you were supposed to say it before you do it, not just say it, come back and say, oh, by the way, I've bonked Bill. You'd have to explore the feelings you had, the pressures, emotional and sexual, on you and the other person, with the group or with the people it directly impacted on before you did the deed.
I mean, I don't know anybody who thought they wanted to get married. I certainly didn't think I wanted to get married. And I, consider myself proud never to have gotten married. And it is quite different again now. But yeah, I mean, nuclear family, a lot of us had come from pretty unpleasant nuclear families. And that does open up ideas for how you might live.
It seemed that the nuclear family was really in crisis. And the idea of a stable couple having children was not really part of most people's experience in that particular kind of sub-society, and it also implied a degree of isolation from others. I mean, there was a great collectivist vibe at that time. How you live together was very much open to question, and I think we, partly just out of necessity, but we tended to live in communes, and that seemed as if that was the way that could work more generally in society.
By the mid-70s, there were about 5,000 squatters in Lambeth, more than in any other London borough. Down the road from Villa Road was St Agnes Place, another squatted street, populated by Rastafarians and many members of the Workers' Revolutionary Party. Jane Halsall-Dixon has squatted here since she was 3 years old and is one of very few squatters left in Lambeth.
We're going up. Yeah. This is the very small bathroom, which is used by about 15 people at the minute. This is kind of a bicycle room.
There's been, a transient community of people who've moved in here and sorted their lives out a bit, got themselves together, possibly moved on, possibly not, in my case, not. But, it's provided housing for a hell of a lot of people in 30 years.
There was probably about 12 people. And what I remember about it was I didn't have to cook, like, probably once every 12 days or something, because everyone had to cook. There was a rota system. So I didn't have to do the housework every day. I didn't have to cook every day. I didn't have to shop every day. I had to do it, like, once every so often, and it was fantastic. I like that, because I'm not really a domesticised person, to be quite honest.
There was this Polish girl, and, God, I was just in a fury at her the whole time. Because we pooled all our money, and then we would each take turn making dinner. And she was, like, always really going for, like, the most bargain basement bargains she could. So one day she comes home with, like, I don't know, 4 pounds of pork chops, right? That just stank, And she said, "Oh, don't worry, I'm going to soak them in vinegar." So she soaks these pork chops in vinegar, and say, "I'm not going to eat these pork chops that have been soaked in vinegar and they're rotten, and why are you buying rotten food?" But anyway, after I left, she started sleeping with my boyfriend. So then I was mad at her for another reason.
I do remember in the first house that I visited before I moved on to Villa Road, I'd be in the kitchen. You'd have people wandering in and out of this kitchen. There were teacups everywhere. Someone might take a teacup and just go rinse it for half a second in the sink. You'd be drinking out of these incredibly, to my mind now, and even then, grotty, cups. But, I was a kid. We were young. It didn't matter. I mean, we just sort of did it. So it was, and the house that I moved into, number 20, was much more tidy, and things like toilet paper instead of newspapers, things like that. It was like, okay, I can live here. We have toilet roll. And we washed our glasses. We washed our mugs.
Hi, Pim. Okay.
What you're looking at is a very first experiment of a system of nomadic living, perhaps you could call it, but or perhaps retractable housing systems.
Pim, originally from Holland, came to Villa Road in the early 70s. Having lived in a teepee in California, he believed that the environmental way forward was for people to build their own dwellings. For a long time, he lived in a handmade hut in the garden of 31 Villa Road. He now squats a few doors down, living in a domed tent inside his house.
What often sort of strikes me when I wake up in the morning, the moment of opening your eyes and what is it that you see? And it often sort of strikes me how delightful it is that when you open your eyes and I just look up at the ceiling, well, it is not the ceiling, but look up at the sky, and how I see from the bottom down and then have this field of view. And it's a beautiful start of the day. And it is something that could be available to anyone.
In the 70s, all aspects of living were being called into question. These were the early days of feminism, and women on Villa Road were as keen to end male domination as to overthrow capitalism.
I think over time we had several different Marxist reading groups going on, but the one I remember in Villa Road, the one that I remember going to, was an all-women's Marxist reading group. And through that, I think we started to think about redefining our role as women.
We were doing consciousness raising, and we would go away for weekends and have weekends away and stuff. And we did things, like we had our book called Our Body, Ourselves, which was fantastic. And women learnt about how to have orgasms through spare rib and vibrators, which was absolutely fantastic. And I think, yeah, that was brilliant.
We read books, sort of Marxist sort of books, I suppose. We did self-examination, which was quite popular those days.
What does that mean?
Well, you know, when you examine... I remember one meeting that we had speculum, because Maureen's a doctor, so she could have them, and we examined ourselves and learnt about our bodies.
Which bit of your body?
You're going to be so embarrassed. There's all these... we tried to find out where our cervixes were, which was a journey in itself.
Do you remember examining your cervix?
No, I never did any of that. I didn't do any of that. But yes, that was going on. Lots of use of mirrors.
I realized that it is perhaps a useful exercise for human beings to try and live at the lowest possible level of standard of living, rather than always trying to get the higher up the ladder and get more and more and more. To sort of maybe perhaps less is perhaps also beautiful.
The Villa Road community governed itself. Villa Roaders were antagonistic to the police, who they viewed as an embodiment of their enemy, the state.
Would you ever have called the police?
No.
What did you do instead?
Well, there were, where there were instances of theft and so on within the street, then those were dealt with at street meetings. And in one incident I remember, we jailed a guy for a week, I believe.
Everyone was losing their stereos. We eventually managed to catch this young black guy who was, I think, 15 at the time. And so he said that he had been thrown out of home, that he had nowhere to go, and he was stealing all this stuff so as he could survive. And so in typical Villa Road fashion, we held a street meeting, emergency street meeting, what to do about him. And we decided that we would give him a home, we would give him somewhere to live, and we would give him money. And so he lived with us then.
Villa Roaders identified politically with the working class. They supported striking workers. They had a Villa Road banner and travelled en masse to march in support of the striking firemen and the Grunwick workers. They wanted to link the squatting struggle to other anti-capitalist struggles.
Can you explain why, as squatters, you thought it was important to join ranks with workers?
Because the general atmosphere of the time was we were all believed in, everybody getting together, and the only way to change the world was for everybody to get together, to recognise that we all had interests in common, and so on, a sort of general leftism.
There was a strike on by the tarmac workers, and I went along on behalf of the squatters and spoke with a megaphone, just explaining that we supported their struggle and inviting them to, take part in a joint march on the town hall. The workers were going to be the ruling class of the future.
Xander Fraser even became a squatters' representative in the Transport and General Workers Union, allowed in as a mark of their solidarity with the Villa Road struggle.
They should be organised, and we are anxious that they should join forces with those of our...
Were you the only squatter who was a member of the T&G?
Well, I have to say, I did find it slightly unusual, yeah, because technically there wasn't... I was a building worker, so on that level, actually, I assume I was entitled to be there, but yeah, really, I was in that branch as a representative of Villa Road, not because I was working in the building trade.
Oh, no, watch out for this telephone thing. Just step over it.
This room is problems with flooring, but is a kind of communal workspace, and it functions quite well like that for us.
Some on the left had more ambitious political goals and were explicitly focused on building a revolution to overthrow the state. Piers Corbyn was an astrophysicist, a full-time squatting activist in West London, and a revolutionary. He was well known in squatting circles and always present at protests and demonstrations.
Everybody seems to remember you charging around London with a carrier bag containing peanut butter sandwiches. That was your sole sustenance, is that right?
I used to eat a lot of peanut butter sandwiches, and I believe there's a jar of peanut butter over there still. Mainly the bags contained leaflets. In those days I was a member of the International Marxist group, and I'd been so for 2 years.
I joined the IMG, and I was excited about being in this political organization. The IMG was a Trotskyist-derived group, and the initials stand for the International Marxist Group. And there is a very complex genealogy of the IMG's relationship to the Fourth International, which was, as you may know, the alternative to the Stalinist International.
What the IMG was, it was what they called itself the British section of the Fourth International, the Trotskyist Fourth International, which was like a liaison or alliance of revolutionary groups around the world. Their general activity was to build labour movement, support activity in trade unions and so on. So they saw this type of stuff as possibly peripheral or possibly not, and there was ambiguity.
Some hardline Trotskyist groups were unenthusiastic about getting involved in a political issue as woolly and vegetarian as squatting. They preferred to focus on workers' struggles, hoping to build a disciplined vanguard that would bring on the revolution. But some revolutionaries did take squatting seriously.
Was the IMG the only revolutionary party? Oh, there's your phone.
Weather action? Oh, magic, how are you? Oh, fine. I'm just, it's all right, carry on. I'm being interviewed by some, there's a BBC here interviewing me about squatting and housing, but it doesn't matter, carry on, tell me. Bye. Sorry, yeah, someone just wanted something.
Yeah, so was the
Should have ignored that, really, shouldn't I?
Was the IMG the only revolutionary organisation to get behind squatting?
Yes, in a serious way, anyway.
The IMG, fanatical about correct Marxist terminology, nitpicked about whether or not squatting could, strictly speaking, be defined as a revolutionary act. On Villa Road, Pete Cooper had joined the party.
Was squatting in and of itself a revolutionary act?
Oh God, I can't remember. From the Trotskyist point of view, I think it would have been foolish not to engage the energies of these people who were clearly very willing to take part in direct action.
For you in the IMG, would you have said that squatting itself was a revolutionary act?
Well, some of us did, yes, because it was expropriation of property, and we said it had a dynamic of revolutionary act.
But for the IMG, the real point of demanding housing was not to get housing, but to expose the weaknesses of capitalism.
Those demands for housing, what was it? Housing and jobs.
Not evictions and layoffs, yeah.
Well, they were in kind of Trotskyist terms. Those are transitional demands, are they?
Oh, that's right. Transitional demands were demands that couldn't really be met within the terms of the system.
So a transitional demand is a demand that that sounds like a reasonable demand,
yeah,
but that will expose the shortcomings of the capitalist state in their inability to deliver it.
Yeah, like housing for all seemed a reasonable thing. Why shouldn't everyone have somewhere to live? But actually the system probably couldn't deliver without fundamentally changing.
Could housing for all be achieved? Well, they would say, the IMG would say, no, it couldn't be achieved under capitalism. So this was therefore an intrinsic anti-capitalist demand, or what is called a transitional demand, which is something everybody wants, but can only be achieved if capitalism is destroyed. So the dynamic of the movement will lead to the destruction of capitalism, along with other sort of demands, other transitional demands, if support in a united front gets wide enough.
That is, I think, how Trotsky's method works, and that really made a lot of sense to me.
I have a bit of perhaps a compulsion, particularly when I keep passing by a particular spot, and there's every time the same kind of items there, and then this process of thinking straight in mind from what can I do with it, and particularly with these items, and here is a nice example. For the first few weeks or months, I just didn't think I should go pick it up. And then at some point I thought, well, I'll start picking up just a few pieces and take them home and see what I can do with it.
Some on Villa Road saw their inner world as the route to changing society. Louise Eichenbaum had come to London from New York as a trained psychotherapist, attracted by British feminist writing. From her squat in Villa Road, she set up the Women's Therapy Centre with Susie Orbach, believing that therapy could be harnessed to left-wing goals.
For me, psychoanalysis and psychotherapy absolutely came right out of my political activity, because as a feminist, we really understood that in order to change oneself, you couldn't just say, I no longer want to be this person, the person I was raised to be, the little girl raised to be a certain kind of feminine character who defers to people, who's submissive, who feels insecure, who doesn't feel entitled, and so on. We knew that we no longer wanted to be that person. And so if one wanted to change deeply, we had to look to the unconscious.
I think people came to see that bringing change wasn't just about changing physical, social aspects of society. I think people started to recognise that change actually maybe has a psychological dimension, an internal dimension as well.
What could you do? What could you do if you let go, Jimmy, baby? What could you do if you let go, Jimmy?
I was very political right from my teenage. I come from a very political family, and I spent very intensive 10 years from the age of 17 on, utterly involved in outward politics. I was also engaging in a lot of personal relationships, and a girlfriend of mine, German girl, who's also very active in politics, committed suicide. And I just thought I could go that way so easily, because I so often felt suicidal. And I started to think, just a minute, we're in a very radical left-wing movement with very radical left-wing boyfriends, and she was unhappy enough to do that, and I'm unhappy enough nearly to do that. So I thought, it's not all out there, it's also inside.
Having decided to devote her life to therapy, Jenny James became a follower of Wilhelm Reich, an associate of Sigmund Freud's. Significantly, Reich was a communist whose left-wing goal was to adapt therapy to make it available to the working class. More controversially, Jenny also followed Californian psychotherapist Arthur Janoff. He had developed a therapy known as primal scream, in the course of which patients relived the trauma of their own birth.
It's the only place I had that was mine, that was safe.
Despite having no formal training, Jenny set up a primal therapy commune in Donegal in Ireland. At the same time, she established a sister commune in a squat at number 12 Villa Road. The idea was that therapy should not be the preserve of the moneyed bourgeoisie, but should be available free of charge to anybody.
I was called the black sheep of the... Oh, I'd brought the therapy movement into disrepute. This came from the big posh therapy centres, and what it really boiled down to is I wasn't asking money. And I was saying that anyone can do therapy if they go through things themselves. They don't need some posh training. It's just a question of human empathy and, of course, knowing yourself really, really well, being very honest with yourself. And so I just opened the doors.
It was primal scream, and it did involve screaming, letting, which was, sorry, I'm not laughing at that. I mean, it was, it's very genuinely felt, and it was about letting out your inner anguish. It was noisy.
That's what I say to you. It's extremely organic and well worked out. Nothing's false. It is something that comes out, but when things do really come out from very far down in the body, they can sound quite animal-like. They can be quite scary.
What wasn't nice was that they were all naked while they were doing it. So when you're 6 and there's a big group of people rolling around the floor naked, you're thinking, what is going on here? And that was my friend's mum. She was the one that did it, Babs. And you just think, oh, it's so strange, because you're playing out in the garden, you're popping for a drink, and someone's in the kitchen totally naked.
Helen Russell joined the Primal Scream commune in Villa Road in 1976.
Jenny is very charismatic and very, very strong. Her personality is very, very strong. It's like she has an aura like this, you know. Our one-to-one sessions were extraordinary and incredibly valuable, and I wouldn't ever regret any of that or want it to be any different. But the downside was the group living, everybody, and the thing was, you know, we're all there, we're all feeling really vulnerable, we're all looking for ourselves, we're all looking for friends and support and home and family and answers. And so everybody was vulnerable, and everybody was at different stages of this exploration, this journey. And there was no account taken of that in any structured way or in any way, really.
Throughout the years, what would happen is now and then some of the sort of the stronger characters would actually cross the line. It's a metaphorical line. They'd cross the line, come in, get involved. We had a lot of very lovely-looking women in our commune, and they'd form relationships and they start to look at it.
So was that what drew them in, that was the women?
I would say that was probably, obviously, a first hook, if you like. But then they'd seen it's very interesting what we do. They'd see that, and they'd see that it worked, and they'd get interested. It was a deeper way of living.
I remember that the Primal Screamers, you know, the story was, I think it was probably true too, that the Primal Screamers sort of sent vixens out onto the street to seduce the handsome boys who were on the left and to get them to scream instead of, you know, agitate or something.
I don't think it was that organised. It sounds a bit of a conspiracy theory to me.
You weren't lured in by a woman?
I was lured in by a woman, actually, so you never know, do you? But I don't think she was acting on orders. I think she just fancied me.
It always reminded me of that film, The Invasion of the Body Snatchers, in that one would wake up and discover that, you know, somebody else from the street had been sort of captured by the primal scream.
In May 1976, Pete Cooper crossed the road and went to live at number 12.
There was the view that the personal is political, and that the way you have relationships with other people is actually as significant as significant a part of social transformation as the actual kind of the institutions of the state and what have you. So I'd sort of resigned from this sort of leadership position in the street in favour of a kind of inward journey. And it seems strange now because it seems one was Marx, one was Freud, but actually Reich seemed to offer a position to. I didn't think of it as being as less revolutionary. I thought of it as possibly more, a further step in a revolutionary direction.
Was he lost to the IMG at that point?
I would say so. Yeah. No, it took me by surprise. It really did. Because you spent some time railing against these personal politics people, and then it became one.
In a sense, I felt he joined it in rather sort of similar, with a rather similar impulse that he joined the IMG, and that was that he was looking for something that was going to sort of really engage him.
This continuing search for a belief system led Pete Cooper to embrace ideas that were far removed from his rigorous left-wing analysis.
Along with the therapy, there was a whole ragbag of kind of new age humanistic ideas. For example, better eyesight without glasses. So I stopped wearing my glasses for a while, believing that my short-sightedness would go as my energy flowed more freely.
What I wanted was my hands to grow, right? And because I'm a piano player. And so what I wanted was my hands to grow. And I'd got this idea that my hand had stopped growing when I was about 9, which was when my little sister was born. You know, you put these 2s and 2s together and you come out with 79. And so I have no idea of the truth of this, or not really, but it was something that Janov wrote about in his books, that people had gone through such deep therapeutic healing that parts of their bodies which had been stunted, unstunted themselves. And, you know, they kind of picked up your life where it had got stopped. And, you know, so I had this daft idea. And to me, it was a really real idea that my hands would grow. My hands didn't grow.
Helen Russell left the Screamers and crossed the road in the opposite direction. Embracing the political fervour of her fellow Villa Roaders, she became passionately involved in the politics of defending the street.
There's another bedroom upstairs, but the person whose room it is isn't here, and I don't really want to go up and invade their space because it's not really like that. Do you want to come out? So, and this is my room. Yeah, it's all right, this room. Although nowadays the pigeons keep me awake.
By 1976, there were at least 200 squatters living on Villa Road. As temperatures rose during the exceptionally hot summer of that year, the confrontation between squatters and the council intensified. Under threat of eviction, the squatters on Villa Road decided to defend the houses by barricading themselves in. They were now living behind their own iron curtain in a state of siege.
The barricades came about because the Lambeth Council wanted to demolish the whole of Villa Road. This had been their long-term plan. They couldn't do it because we were living in the houses. But they, I think, probably served eviction orders on us. And we decided that we were going to stay. And so we thought, well, we'll barricade ourselves in. The bailiffs will come, but if they can't get into the houses, they can't evict us. So that was another sort of form of direct action. We would scour Lambeth looking for wood, sheets of corrugated iron, barbed wire. There were a lot of building sites that went short of things in those days, and the ingenuity of people to get all these materials together was phenomenal. The barricade in front of number 7, number 9 Villa Road was very beautiful because we painted it. It was a carefully tended barricade.
Victory Villa was the big sort of slogan. Property is theft. That was another of the big slogans that was up on the Villa Road barricades, and we were all into that. There was a kind of sort of anarchist tinge, I think, to the kind of Villa Road collective political will.
New arrival on the street was committed anarchist Tony Cook, who became Helen Russell's boyfriend. He believed in continual struggle and built his barricades accordingly.
The first thing I and the two chaps who moved in with me began to do was obviously to sort out the barricades on our house. We had almost like triple barricades of corrugated sheets and joists, and then more corrugated sheets, and then joists and props, and all put together with 6-inch nails. And then on top of the barricade was barbed wire and a gutter. The plan being that we would fill the gutter with petrol and have bits of burning tyre, so we'd have a sheet of flame to meet the bailiffs before they could even get to the house itself. And we also had this huge, great big wooden ball, like on the ball and chain, but this was made out of wood with big 6-inch nails stuck in it on the end of a rope that you could swing, and it would lazily move in front of the house as another disincentive to come anywhere near us.
Sitting at a piano in a basement behind the barricades, Helen Russell worked through the night composing music, deeply affected by the threat to the street.
It was the most special time of my life, actually. It crossed my mind that I should do a setting of the Requiem Mass. I'd learned Latin at school, I was very bad at it, but I loved the poetry of it, I loved the sound of it. And there's a line in the offertorium, tantus labor non sit casus, which it just means, let not this great work be in vain. And that's everything, that is everything. The great work.
In January 77, the council decided to destroy squatters' homes. They targeted St Agnes Place and came to demolish it, bringing with them an army of 250 policemen. Villa Roaders rushed to the rescue.
Very early in the morning, we found out that the council were moving in bulldozers, there were large bus loads of police turning up at the ends of the street and all the rest of it. And of course we all shot off down now, and quite a lot of the residents had already climbed up onto the roofs, basically saying, you know, if you're going to knock the house down, you're going to have to knock us down with them.
Got all the council workers digging up the pipes down at the front, and they filled the drains with cement and they took out the water and the gas pipes. So they really went to town to make sure they were uninhabitable. In this picture, you can just see here is a protester. He's one of the squatters who actually tied a rope around his waist. There was a few of them, and actually walked across the top of this, what's left of the main framework of the house.
We, together with the lawyers from the Law Centre, managed to get a emergency High Court injunction by midday or 1 o'clock that day, forcing the council to withdraw their equipment and to leave us alone.
St Agnes Place was saved, and the council was publicly and humiliatingly defeated. Lambeth Council had to rethink its approach. But Villa Road was still under threat, and the barricades remained in place there for another 2 years. In 1977, Tony Wakeford was living at number 15. He was a member of the Socialist Workers' Party and wrote anti-police songs for his punk band Crisis.
Were you doing a lot of drugs at Villa Road?
Yeah. And before and after. Yeah, mainly lots of speed and some acid. Yeah. Terrible. I'm a fat git now, but then I was like 9 stone. And got to a stage where I woke up one morning, looked in the mirror, pushed my teeth, and all my teeth just went... just sort of bent inwards. Yeah, terrible. Just lots of speed. You know.
Are they your teeth now?
They're capped. What for? That decade, things did seem very black and white, and people really, took sides and made decisions. That's what we were going to do. So it was a very, no middle ground type of thing. But yeah, at the time, we were all very committed.
Despite their committed struggle, the outcome for the Villa Roaders was only a partial victory. In 1978, the council came up with a deal. They would preserve the north side of the street on condition that the south side was destroyed. This was agreed. The squatters took down their barricades, and in the summer of '78, the south side of Villa Road was demolished to make a small patch of green alongside the A23. Most of the houses on the north side became a housing co-op. A few squats remained, including Pym's house, where he continues to live by his ideals.
Actually, I never use this bathroom. I have a composting toilet. I have a lifestyle which does not require running water. I've been doing that ever since I lived in the tipi, and I also was doing that in the little hut out there.
So where's your toilet, Pip?
It is a composting toilet, and as a matter of fact, next to the branches, that is where the toilet and the kitchen waste and everything, and it is a beautiful compost there. Fertility.
The street became much less of a cohesive, exciting place to be. There were a few houses that you know, still now have people in them who were in them at that time, but a lot of people went away, different parts of the world. I left eventually.
I feel really proud of what we achieved, actually. I mean, you know, the revolution didn't happen, but the houses were saved.
St Agnes Place refused to compromise and continued to battle for survival for the next 30 years. It became one of the only 70s squatting communities to survive until now. But the council have recently taken action to repossess the street once and for all. All the remaining squatters have now received eviction notices.
I love living here, you know, it is my home, and sometimes, you know, I've thought about the fact that, you know, if Lambeth weren't coming to evict me, would I just live here for my entire life, from the age of 3 years old to, you know, till I peg it in whatever age that would be, you know what I mean? And to be honest with you, I probably would. And some part of me sort of thinks, God, that's really sad. You know what I mean? God, get a life, go out, go and live somewhere else, go and do something else. But it's my home, and you know, the idea of not having it is a difficult thought. But sorry, can I stop?
From the men of property, the orders came. They sent the hired men and troopers to wipe out the diggers' claim, tear down their cottages, destroy their corn. They were dispersed, but their vision lingers on. You poor take courage, you rich take care. This earth was made a common treasury for everyone to share, all things in common, all people one. You diggers all stand up for glory, stand up now.
Do you live as a nuclear family now?
Yeah.
And what are your political ideals now? Would you still like to see the end of capitalism?
Yeah, I would really, yeah, I think it'd be a good idea.
I don't care about capitalism, but I get a pension out of the tax, pay taxes of everybody, so like it would be counterproductive to be anti-capitalist, right? You don't slap the hand that feeds you.
Do you live in a nuclear family now?
Yes, I got married, I'm supposed to know that, only about 7 years ago.
Do you still hold the same left-wing beliefs that you did?
Absolutely.
I feel quite strongly about the environment, and certainly I support, you know, I support things like the people. There were people at Crystal Palace who were trying to save Crystal Palace, and they were living in trees. And I mean, I very much supported those tree people.
How would you describe your politics now?
Deep green. Extremely green. I, for example, have never had a fridge in my life, and if I'm ever planted in a house where there is one, I switch it off immediately.
What do you do now, Sue?
Oh, well, I'm going to work on a llama farm now. I'm going to have some time in the country.
Sue, what do you do now?
Well, I'm paint, and I like to spend some time in India.
I teach and I practice psychotherapy.
I'm the America's editor of The Economist.
I still see myself as a left-wing anti-capitalist, but it's of no consequence to anybody because at the moment I'm not doing anything about it.
What I do now is I'm a professor of romantic poetry at Queen Mary University of London.
Did you go on to live in a nuclear family?
Yes, it's more or less, yes, yeah. Not particularly successfully.
Would you still see yourself as someone who was hoping for the overthrow of capitalism?
I think that's a very long shot now.
Would you still welcome the overthrow of capitalism?
Probably not. It's not really an option, is it?
You have to be really strong to keep on fighting, you know. And I am fighting, and we all are. Those of us who are still doing what we're doing in this way, we are still fighting. You know, I'm doing my bit for the housing cooperative movement.
So I think capitalism has got a dynamic which will have to end. I mean, the internal conflicts of capitalism are quite horrendous.
And what do you do now?
I do long-range weather forecasting.
The world and all its angels are talking in my head. The world and all its angels.
An extreme brand of feminism coming up on BBC4, calling on women to be political lesbians, preaching that we could never be free until we stopped having sex with men. Continuing Lefties next.
Come the morning, by the dawning light, such crimes and stories